Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Tracy. Hey, everybody. What are we getting into today? What horrible malice are you going to tell me about today?
Well, the malice in today's story took place on a day that should have been celebrated, but that day didn't end the way it started. So, let's get into it. This is Season 4, Episode 7, Darlene Foley. The story of Darlene Foley that we will be talking about today begins on February 7th, 2009. During an interview with Dateline, Tom, Darlene's husband, said, quote, "The first time I saw her, she was beautiful. We just loved being together. We were always together." Now, Darlene M. Foley, also called Dee Dee or Dar to her family or friends, was 41 years old in 2009. Dar was born on August 4th, 1967, in Coldwater, Michigan, to Dale and Marilyn Weber. She married Thomas Foley on May 28th, 1994, in Union City. Dar was a lifelong member of Branch County. She received her Bachelor of Arts degree from Michigan State University in the late 1990s. Dar began working as a teacher in Fairland, Indiana, for 1 year and had been teaching in the Union City School District for 18 years, teaching second grade. She was a member of the Union City Congregational Church, the Coldwater Recreational Softball and Volleyball teams, and the Kalamazoo Soccer Zone soccer team. She coached AYSO soccer, Union City track, and the middle and high school boys and girls basketball teams. She was an avid, disciplined runner, which led to her running in 2 marathon races in Chicago. Dar was a headstrong woman, and if she had an opinion, you were sure to hear it. Dar's first kindergarten class was graduating in 2009, and she was excited and looking forward to presenting them their diplomas. She was a compassionate teacher, coach, mentor, teammate, hero, advocate for children's welfare and special needs students. She was an awesome and unique teacher who touched the lives of several hundred people, children, and adults in her teaching career, leaving a lifelong lasting impression on those lives she touched. She even donated one of her kidneys to someone in need in 2005. It was in college when Dar and Tom met, fell in love, and married. Dar and Tom had a son, Heath, who turned 10 years old in 2009. It was on February 7th that they were going to celebrate their son's 10th birthday and had a party planned for him later on in the day. Tom took Heath to a football game in Marshall earlier in the day, and later he and his friend Skylar would play video games in the family's home while waiting for the party to kick off. When it was time, Tom took Heath and Skylar to Union City to the birthday party while Dar stayed at home to take a shower. She would arrive between 4:45 and 5 p.m. later on with 3 other children that she would pick up on her way to the party. It was around 4:50 p.m. when Tom began to worry. His wife was never late to anything. She was always on time or early. As neither one of them had cell phones at the time, Tom called each of the children's homes from wherever they were having the party, I guess from a landline, to see if Dar had picked up the children, but Dar had not arrived to any of the homes to pick them up. It was at that moment that Tom decided to drive home to check on Dar. He just had a feeling something was wrong. When Tom arrived home, he found a horrific scene. The back door was open. The window pane of the door was broken. Tom was calling out his wife's name, but no answer as he went through the home. When he didn't hear a response, he then went to the shower, and there she was. But what he saw was a horrific scene. Dar was in the shower, but she was dead. He immediately called 911 and frantically asked for help. Quote, "I need an ambulance now. What is the emergency? My wife. Is she breathing? No. She's gone. She's laying in the shower. She's just laying in all the blood. Oh my God. Please help." Listening to the 911 call, Tom sounded distraught. His pleas for help were heart-wrenching. Even though he was calling and pleading for someone to help her, he knew by what he saw that his wife was no longer alive. Rescuers were dispatched immediately. When Detective James Carbon arrived at the scene, he knew he was in for a long night. He said, quote, "We don't have a lot of homicides that happen in and around Branch County, and because of her position as a school teacher and because of the people who knew her, that put it in a much more serious type of investigation." Detective James Carbon and crime scene investigators scoured the crime scene, taking pictures and gathering evidence in what appeared to be a home burglary gone wrong. The first clue was the broken glass coming from the kitchen window. It appeared that a beer bottle was used to break that particular window. I'm sure Tom felt like he was in a nightmare, a moment Tom Foley could have never imagined he'd be in 23 years earlier of his life. Back then, Tom was quite the athlete. He was on the high school basketball team. The number of his jersey was 30. And with 15 seconds on the clock, he scored the winning basketball, giving their high school their regional title. That winning score gave the high schooler Tom Foley a place in Coldwater High's Hall of Fame. For Tom, that winning shot would forever be remembered. Even years later, someone would come up and say, "Hey, remember that shot you made back in high school?" And he would say, "Of course I remember." He felt like he was on top of the world, and he was quite the talk of the town. In 1991, Tom and Dar began dating. She was known to have a personality as big as her smile. And let me tell you, her smile could have been seen across the room. The first time Tom saw Dar, she was playing softball and wearing some lime green rec specs. He said she looked a little funny, but when she took them off, I thought she was beautiful. It was a classic case of opposites attract. Tom was a laid-back, easygoing type, and Dar didn't hide what she was thinking. Quote, "She had opinions, and she let those be known," Tom said of his wife, and that was one of the reasons he loved her. He said, "I still love her today." When Dar's sisters learned the couple were to be married, they were left kind of scratching their heads as to why. Quote, "There's got to be something wrong with Tom to stay with Dar." When asked if they could be around her, with her being the one that was the center of attention all the time, they all said no. She was controlling and was not a domesticated person, according to her sisters. Tom and Dar were married in 1994. Right from the start, Dar took the lead. When they became parents to Heath, it was Dar who worked and provided for the family, as it was decided that one parent should stay home and take care of their son. And it was Dar who had a great paying job as a teacher. So Tom was the stay-at-home dad. Heath, their son, was the center of their lives. So there's a little background on this family. Now let's get back to the investigation at the Foley residence. Dar had been shot in the head with a shotgun from near point-blank range. The investigation later revealed it had been within 6 inches from her when the fatal shots were fired. Tom was devastated. In his recorded interview at the police station, he stated he felt something wasn't right because she was never late. He said the door to the kitchen was locked, and they didn't usually do that, but as Dar was going to take a shower, it was. He said there was stuff all over the wall, and he grabbed her. Quote, "It didn't look like her." He sobbed, shaking his head. He was rocking back and forth and sobbing during his interview. The house was ransacked, and there were several things missing from the home, such as jewelry, their son's gaming system, credit cards, as well as some financial information were among the items missing. And then there was the medicine cabinet. Quote, "It looked like they basically scooped up a shelf in the medicine cabinet, potentially looking for prescription drugs." To Detective Carbon, the items that were missing weren't nearly as telling as what was left behind. Dar's purse was sitting on a chair in the hallway. There were other things of value in the home that were left. Quote, "It just doesn't make a lot of sense," said Detective Carlin. "Neither did the use of a shotgun. I mean, shotguns are bulky. And if you are burglarizing a home, you have to take the shotgun out with you and whatever you have taken along with it seems a little cumbersome to me as well. It doesn't make any sense. But it wasn't until the following day when police found new evidence that would lead their investigation in a whole new direction. Investigators had found something in the basement of the home. Now, the home that the Foleys lived in was what looked like to me like a historic 2-story brick farmhouse. And down in the Michigan basement, just lying right out in the middle of the floor, was a suspiciously dirt and dust-free yellow Dunham's sports plastic bag with 3 shotgun shells inside. Just right there in plain sight. I mean, how could you miss that bright yellow bag? Doesn't make sense to me. Why here? As I mentioned in a previous show, a Michigan basement is a dirt floor basement. Again, back to the Dateline interview, quote, there were a number of people who were really offended by his demeanor. One of Dar's sisters said, as all 3 of them were being interviewed, they were speaking of Dar's funeral. The day of her funeral was Friday the 13th, oddly enough, for those superstitious listeners. Now, let's talk about the funeral. It was held at the Union City High School gymnasium because there were more than 500 people who came to honor and remember Dar. There was not a church large enough to accommodate a gathering of this size in their town. Her sister said that, quote, Dar was so full of life. She had a lot more to give, and we can't bring her back. It seemed no one in Coldwater could comprehend what had happened, including Steve and Joni Pierce, close friends of both Dar and Tom, who learned of the murder from Tom himself. Quote, I said, the 3 of you were always together. And he was crying, and he said, I know. I should have been there for her. And then I said, if you would have been, the 3 of you would be dead now, instead of just Dar.
Tom and the son were out together? Where was the son? Did I miss that?
On the day she was shot?
He was out and about, and he came home and found her, but he wasn't with his son.
Right. He left his son at the party.
Oh, okay.
So remember, he had the 2 boys, like his son and then his son's friend, Skylar. He left them at the party and then went to go check on his wife.
Okay. Right, I was just a little bit confused about where the kid was.
Within just 24 hours of the investigation, Jim Carbon had abandoned the theory that this was just a random act of violence. Quote, it appeared to me that this was a staged B&E, which is breaking and entering to try to hide a homicide that had took place. But according to Jim Carbon, whoever staged the burglary did not factor in the weather that day. He said, quote, it got really warm, unseasonably warm that day. We had a huge snow melt, and because of this, you would expect muddy footprints from someone coming in that door. But there were no muddy footprints left behind. Not in the home, nor were there any on the premises that the police could find. It was a muddy, wet day that February 7th, leaving the terrain a muddy, slushy mess. As with many cases involving the murder of a spouse, Tom was the main person of interest in the case.
I don't mean to interrupt you again, but where were his muddy footprints for when he came in?
Good point.
Okay.
Good
All
point.
right. So he's the main suspect, so.
Yep. As most investigators start with a boyfriend or husband and work their way out from there. There was also a glove found outside the home that Tom said neither he nor Dar had owned, and it was sent to forensics, which did show DNA of an unknown male and an unknown female. And now, this was only mentioned briefly in the interview on Dateline, but it was the yellow bag found in the basement, the bag containing the shotgun shells, that interested Carbon the most. He had thought it was strange to find this bag in the basement, and like the glove, the bag and its contents were also sent to forensics. What they uncovered was there were not any prints recovered from the shotgun shells. However, there was a print on the bag, and it was Tom's. When asked if he owned a shotgun, Tom said he did not and wouldn't even know how to operate one, as he never used one before. Now, side note here, Dar's brother had owned a shotgun that had come up missing months before, but he never reported it, as he felt it had been taken by, quote, a friend or someone he knew. Now, with having Tom's print on the bag, Detective Carbon felt he needed to take a closer look at Tom and his seemingly picture-perfect marriage. Quote, "I think they did a lot of things together," Carbon stated, "but I don't think they were the picture-perfect couple." And neither did Dar's sister, Lynn, in whom Dar had once confided and said, quote, "Tom doesn't love me anymore. He's leaving me. He's going through his change of life, you know?" Dar's sisters were becoming increasingly suspicious, especially, they said, after watching Tom's behavior at the funeral. Quote, "It was almost like he was relieved," one sister said. Another one of her sisters said, quote, "People that had come up to me after the service were really offended by his demeanor, his joyfulness." To which Tom replied later in an interview, quote, "These were things that I also heard, and it's ridiculous. I mean, taking care of Heath was on my mind. Wondering who killed my wife was on my mind." His voice was quivering as he spoke. "They don't know the things I've been through." Maybe so, but Detective Carbon was keeping a very watchful eye on Tom Foley. They decided it was time to interview the other Foley that resided in the home, and that was Heath, the couple's 10-year-old son. When police interviewed Heath and his friend Skylar, they learned that before Tom and the boys left for the party, they had been playing video games in the house, and Tom had instructed them to go outside and start up the truck, and that he would be out in a few minutes. Thinking he was possibly taking a shower, Skylar had said neither of the boys could recall anything unusual about the day, but then Skylar thought of something. The boys were playing outside in and around the barns on the property when they heard a very loud noise. To them, it sounded like glass shattering and a bunch of things falling. To Detective Carbon, it had appeared that Skylar may have heard the shotgun blast that afternoon, and he also thought that there was one other person in that house at the time, and that person was Tom Foley. If it was true, then Dar was murdered earlier than originally thought. Or, more significantly, it meant Tom Foley was still in the house. Quote, "That lead was huge. It was very important," James Carbon stated. But if Tom Foley was in the house and pulled that trigger, the question remained, why? The answer for that is quite simple. Murder for money, Carbon said. Money in the form of an insurance policy. Quote, "I think that he wanted out of the marriage and did whatever he needed to do to make sure that happened." How much was the insurance policy, you may be wondering? $310,000. The evidence against Tom Foley was circumstantial, but compelling. Now here's what's odd. Why were the shells in the bag in the basement, but the shotgun was nowhere to be found? In March of 2009, 1 month after Dar was gunned down in the shower, state police arrested Tom Foley and charged him with the murder of his wife. Tom said, quote, "What? Why? This cannot be happening. Why do you think I did this? I did not kill my wife." And this was Tom's reaction to being placed under arrest and charged with murder. Heath, his son, was then placed in the custody of Dar's family. To the Pierces, Tom and Dar's good friends, said the news of Tom's arrest was almost as stunning as Dar's death during the interview on Dateline. They were asked, quote, "Could you conceive of Tom hating his wife so much that he would want to kill her?" "Absolutely not," was their immediate resounding response. "What about killing her for insurance money?" Again, immediately they said, "Absolutely not. That would be stupid. She made good money. Why kill the golden goose?" They were asked, "Do you think they had a good marriage?" Mrs. Pierce responded, "Yeah, I do. Everything seemed to be going really good for them. It seems sadistic, shooting your wife at point-blank range, killing the mother of your son on the very day that he was celebrating his 10th birthday? He never would have done that to his son." 10 days after Tom's arrest, police brought Heath, the Foley's son, in for a second interview, and this time Heath recalled hearing a noise that day. The detective said, quote, "Skylar talks about remembering an unusual sound. Do you remember anything about that?" Heath said, "Our neighbors would like shoot guns. It was like maybe a gunshot or maybe like broken glass. It was one of those two things maybe." During Tom's interview, when they told him what the kids said they heard, Tom said that he had been repairing some of the window panes on the barn as they were in disrepair. Tom said that he had been carrying one of the window panes when he dropped it, and it shattered, causing the loud noise. He said, quote, "They were old barn windows that I was trying to clean up. I went to grab them, and one of them slipped out of my grip, and it smashed on our back porch step." The detective said, "And it made a lot of noise." "Yeah, it did. Yep." But Detective Carbon wasn't really buying Tom's explanation. The boys were playing approximately 75 yards from the house. It was Carbon's opinion that the sound of a pane of glass and frame wouldn't have reached the location of the barn. And I say, why not test out the theory? Get the same-sized glass pane, stand on the porch, place detectives out by the barn where the kids were, and drop that baby and see what's heard. I mean, why didn't they do that? Police also said they carefully searched the area around the back porch. Quote, "There was no glass that we could see. When we looked at the scene on that particular night as well as the next day."
Wait, so the detectives are saying, like, on the day of the murder, they're saying they didn't see any glass on the back porch.
Correct.
But they didn't know to look for glass, did they?
I don't know if they were specifically looking for glass at that point, but it was on that same back porch. That's the door that had the broken glass. That's the door that was open. Maybe they were, of course, they're looking at that area because that was the entry point.
Right. So if there was broken glass in the door that was broken into, then where's that glass?
Well, it was more toward the inside of the house, right? Because you're, boom, busting in the glass. So more in toward the house versus glass outside of the house. So I think it was like after they, had this story, they're like, wait, hold up. We took pictures. There's no broken glass out there. I think that's how all that came about.
Oh, and actually his explanation is a little bit more sus because he knows that glass was broken on that back porch to get in the door. Or at least it was staged that way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's a little sus.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think is a little wonky here is that why are you carrying a couple glass, panes of glass when you're basically getting ready to haul ass and leave to take your son to a birthday party? Like, that doesn't make sense to me at all. Why would you be doing that? Hey, kids, go start the car. I'll be out in a minute. And then, P.S., I'm going to go grab a couple window panes and bring them up to the house? That doesn't jive.
Yeah. But none of that, the whole story's starting to fall apart now.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so go ahead.
All right, so again, back in the interview with Dateline and Dar's sisters, the writing, as they say, is on the wall. They were certain of their brother-in-law's guilt. Quote, "We went over every case we could come up with to not make it Tom." I think Tom resented Dar and that he couldn't be a man. I think it kind of ate at him and he couldn't take it anymore. He didn't divorce her because he's a selfish coward. He wanted Heath, he wanted the house, he wanted her money, and if he divorced her, he would lose everything. In November 2009, the trial and prosecution of Tom Foley for the murder of his wife began. The prosecution argued that no one but Tom had motive to kill her. But Tom's defense team felt police had rushed to judgment. Defense attorney Tom Schaefer and defense investigator Ken Oberstein said, quote, "In their mind, it's always the boyfriend or the husband or the person who finds the body," which in this case was the husband and the person who found the body. Tom said, "They wanted me bad. What's easier for them? Go after someone they can actually physically see, or go after someone that they cannot physically see?" So what's wrong with the idea that money was motive? Dateline asked Tom. He said, "Absolutely not. I mean, we had a mortgage, and to be able to move on after all of this was going to take a hell of a lot more money than that." So remember, it was like the policy was like $310,000.
It wasn't that much, and he didn't work. So even if he got the $310,000, he probably wouldn't be able to keep paying his mortgage regularly or keep paying for everything else. So $310,000, it's not $1 million. It's not enough where he'd be able to set himself up, I don't think.
Yeah, and I'm also
That's
thinking,
not necessarily a great motive in my eyes.
right, and I'm also thinking that, this guy wasn't working. She was the one who was working, and I'm thinking she made him the beneficiary on the policy. I mean, that's pretty standard. You're married, you have a kid. What if something happens to me? I got to make sure there's money for my family.
If she was the pants of the family, chances are that he didn't even know about that policy.
Yeah, could be.
I mean, I know that, my wife doesn't know what policies I have on me or her. She has no clue. And it's not because she's dumb. It's just because she doesn't do the open enrollment at my job.
Mm-hmm.
And then we don't really talk about it because it's like, whatever. It's money coming out of my check. She has
Yeah.
no idea how much insurance we have.
Exactly. Ditto here with Todd. I've got the same thing. I've got him as a beneficiary and, of course, money for my kids. He doesn't know. We just do what we need to do when we do our open enrollment.
Exactly. So my point is that's a really sus motive.
Yeah.
I'm not buying that motive.
Yeah, me either. Me either. So after 2 weeks of testimony, the jury came to a verdict. At this point, Tom still believed in the system and said, quote, I felt that the evidence was going to prove that there was no way I had anything to do with this. But 12 jurors did not share that feeling. They found Tom guilty of first-degree murder. And needless to say, Tom was shocked. The thought of life in prison without the possibility of parole was devastating. Now, regarding the guilty verdict, one of Dar's sisters said, quote, my sister was still dead. It still didn't bring her back. But you had a little bit of faith in the justice system. Tom's defense team was also devastated. Despite the verdict that was handed down, Tom said, quote, I said to myself, God is not going to let me go to prison for the rest of my life. Something has to turn around. Could this be the end of the story as we know it? To that I say no. Nope. Here's a twist in this tragic tale. Less than 24 hours after the verdict, Tom's defense team received a call from a woman. This is a woman who essentially said, quote, I saw the murderer, and it wasn't Tom Foley. Boom! A bombshell just fell out of the sky. Was there now hope for a newly convicted husband? After the witness came forward, it was a total snowball effect, as 2 more witnesses came forward and said he saw a light-colored car speeding away from the property, and the other said he saw a black SUV parked by one of the barns at the Foley residence. The sightings were within 2 hours of Dar's murder. Quote, it was just like one after another, Tom said. And I was like, what is going on? Where the hell were these people before? The judge who was about to sentence Tom Foley to life wanted to hear what these new witnesses had to say. And after a year of appeals that went all the way to the state Supreme Court, Tom Foley was granted something that most people who are convicted of murder never receive. A second chance.
Where were all these people the whole year leading up to his trial?
That's coming.
That's crazy. Okay.
Yep.
Let's go.
All right. Tom said, quote, I was walking through the chow hall in prison and someone says, hey, Tom, I saw you on the news. I said, really? What for? Well, they gave you a new trial. I said, what? But the news of a new trial didn't change the minds of Dar's family. They remained convinced that not only did Tom kill Dar, he did so on the day of his son's 10th birthday celebration. Again, from the Dateline interview, the sisters were asked, quote, do you think Tom's cold-blooded enough to do something like that to his own kid? 2 of her sisters said yes. The third said, I think there's evil in him. When Dateline interviewed prosecutor Terry Norris, who she thought killed Dar, she resoundingly said, Tom Foley. There's nobody else. As a year and a half after Tom Foley's conviction, both sides filed back into the courthouse to once again determine Tom's fate. Just like the previous trial, the state opened its case with the crime scene analyst. Quote, what is it that you found in the basement? Answer, a yellow Dunham's bag, and located in the Dunham's bag were 3 shotgun shells. Norris, the prosecuting attorney, also showed the jury Foley's home phone records from around that time that Dar was killed. Quote, there were no phone calls that either came in or out. Now, cutting back to the Dateline interview about this, Tom was asked, if your wife doesn't show up somewhere, why not call home and say, have you left yet? Or where are you? Detective Carbon believed that Tom did not call Dar at home because he knew Dar was already dead back at the trial. Member of Dar's family stepped forward to testify that Tom and Dar's marriage was troubled and that Tom wanted out. Now, back in 2006, in the first trial, Caroline Zuck was called to the witness stand. She also taught at the same elementary school as Dar, and there everyone called Dar Dee Dee. It was here at the elementary school that Carrie met Tom. She testified that, quote, he told me that he was thinking about leaving Dee Dee. And Tom also revealed he had feelings for her, and later he had tried to kiss her. And when asked what was her reaction to that, she said, quote, I didn't want anything to do with it. The prosecution called another woman to the stand, and her name was Marion Crandall. That, like Carrie, she had met Tom through Dar. And a couple of weeks after Dar's funeral, she had stopped by the farm to offer Tom support. The prosecution said, quote, I don't mean to embarrass you, but you had sex with Tom in his living room? Marion said, he tried to, and it was stopped. Well, who tried and who stopped? He tried, and we both stopped. The prosecution stated, quote, you don't have a sexual relationship with somebody within 2 weeks of your wife being murdered in that house. But the jury never heard Marion Crandall's testimony because there was no indication of a romantic relationship prior to Dar's murder. So the judge ruled, just as he did in the first trial, that her testimony was prejudicial and therefore inadmissible, and it was a huge blow to the prosecution's case. So let me just clarify something here. So sometimes, right, during a case, if it's questionable testimony, the judge will ask the jury to leave the courtroom. And then the testimony will occur, and the judge will determine if it will be heard or not by the jury. So that's what happened here. The jury was out, heard the testimony, he's like, nope, they're not going to hear it. All right. The prosecutor said if the jury would have been able to hear Marion's testimony, it supports the position that they were not this deep in love couple that Tom kept trying to represent. I mean, that would have proven that. But Norris still had two key witnesses in her pocket. Tom's own son Heath and Skylar, his best friend, both 2 years older and now more certain than ever about what they saw and heard the day Dar was killed. Quote,
last year at church camp, we went for one of our activities. We fired shotguns, and it most resembled that sound.
Then it was Heath's turn on the stand. The last time Todd had seen his son was at his first trial in court almost a year earlier. Quote, while you were in the barn, do you hear something? Norris asked.
Yes. I thought it was maybe Skylar had kind of ran into the wall. Either that or a gunshot.
Norris thought the boys were ear witnesses to what had happened that day on Heath Bar Farm, which is what the Foleys had named their farm. Tom Schaefer, Tom's defense attorney, knew that if he had any hope of getting Tom acquitted, he needed to prove the sound that those boys had heard was anything other than a gunshot. Just 2 weeks before this trial began, while inspecting crime scene photos, Schaefer found what may be the key to his client's freedom. And I says, Ken, is that what I think it is? And you know, to us, it was a Perry Mason moment. The prosecutors believed their strongest link to the case was the boys' testimony, but the defense team felt that over time, the boys' testimonies had changed in insignificant ways. Quote, Heath is now saying what he heard sounded like a gunshot. It wasn't what he said in the first interview, Tom said. The same thing with Skylar. Heath's courtroom testimony left Tom furious, not at his son, but at his accusers, the people who had cared for Heath, which was Dar's family while Tom was incarcerated. Tom wholeheartedly believed that Heath had been coached by Dar's family.
Not for nothing, but I was thinking that. I was thinking that Dar's family is completely against Tom. They're taking care of his son, and 2 years later, his son is telling the story that they kind of want him to tell. It sounds a little fishy. I'm just saying. All right, good.
Yep. Tom's defense team knew from day one that they needed to prove that the sound those boys heard was not the gunshot Instead, it was Tom dropping a window pane on the back porch. Schaefer and Koberstein, Tom's defense team, took a trip to the farm to try to do just that. Quote, "Couple of Perry Mason moments don't come very often," said Koberstein. Right where Tom said he dropped the frame, they found this tiny shard of glass. Immediately, they tried to match the shard to the window frame that Tom had dropped. Quote, "If you take the shard and set it in one of the few remaining puttied areas on the frame, you can see it fits perfectly." It was compelling evidence that Tom may have been telling the truth all along, but Schaefer would need more than a shard of evidence. At the second trial, the defense called Jeanette Moore to the stand. She's the woman who came forward immediately following Tom's guilty verdict. And let's remember that it is this woman who is the reason Tom was ultimately granted a new trial. Moore said that she was driving past the Foley's house right around the time when Dar had been murdered. Quote, "As I approached, this white car came racing out forward, and if I hadn't braked, I would have hit him." Jeanette said she got a good look at the driver. Quote, "It was a young 18 to 20-year-old kid. He had real black hair, and his face was real white, and he was clenching the steering wheel just like this." And this is where she demonstrated, some white knuckles holding onto the steering wheel. And I thought, he's crazy. He's going to kill somebody. During her Dateline interview, Jeanette was asked, "Why didn't you call the police?" So now we're addressing your question. Why did she come forward before? And she said, "I didn't because I was afraid." But when she learned of Tom Foley's guilty verdict, she said she could no longer keep her silence. Quote, "God forgive me, and I truly meant that from the bottom of my heart that I didn't come forward sooner. If I hadn't have been so darn scared." A concession of other witnesses were next on the stand, each saying they also saw mysterious cars at the residence or speeding away from the farm that fateful day in February of 2009. Quote, "Whoever killed Darlene Foley was either in one of those cars or all three of them participated in the murder in some fashion. But Tom knew if he had any hope of acquittal, the jury would need to hear from one more witness. Tom himself would take the stand. He said, quote, "I just didn't want to convince the 12 jurors. I wanted to convince the prosecutor. I wanted to convince the police. I wanted to convince my wife's family. I wanted them to know, to look at me and hear me." While on the stand, Tom was asked if he had Dunham's bags in the home, to which he said yes. Quote, "They weren't ours," he said of the shotgun shells. "The bag is probably ours. I mean, my fingerprint was on the bag. But for 3 clean shotgun shells to be in my basement, it doesn't make any sense." Tom said he's never owned or used a shotgun. Schaefer, the defense attorney, asked Tom why he failed to call home when Dar didn't show up for the party. And Tom said, quote, "Something just wasn't right, so that's why I went home. If we had our cell phones, I would have called her on the cell phone. I had to find her. I had to go and see where she was at." Then it was time for Tom to describe his relationship with his wife. It didn't take him long to lose his composure. Quote, "We were very close." As he struggled to speak, Tom went on to say, "We were together all the time." Tom admitted to the jury that he did once flirt with Carrie Zock, but he says that happened 3 years prior to the murder, during a brief time when he and Dar were arguing more than they were communicating. That put quite a bit of distance between us and also led to intimacy problems between her and I. Tom says he eventually told Dar about his feelings for Carrie. He also says he went to counseling to work on their communication problems. And after those sessions, did things get better, he was asked. Absolutely. Before closing arguments, the prosecutor had one more thing, a surprise rebuttal witness who could unravel Tom's alibi. And her name was Amber Rappeljay. And this was Dar's niece. Amber told the court that 1 week before the murder, she went to the farm to babysit Heath. Quote, "She told us not to go out on the back porch without shoes because Tom had dropped a frame and that there might still be some glass out there. But the judge ruled that Amber's testimony was hearsay and therefore inadmissible. The jury never heard her challenge Tom's claim that the day the murder happened, the noise they heard was from Tom dropping a window frame. Now, with the evidence admitted and for the second time in 2 years, A jury was about to decide Tom's fate. My stomach was turning. I wasn't eating. I was physically sick. Tom said of how he was feeling that day when the jury began its deliberation. As he said in the first trial, defense attorney Tom Schaefer prepared to address the jury for what he and his client Tom Foley hoped would be the last time. Quote, apparently the theory of the prosecution is that if a marriage ever has a bump in the road, then that is a motive for murder? Is that reasonable? I suggest not. Tom Foley says he had nothing to do with Dar's death, but those mysterious cars did. Those cars should not have been there, and the prosecution has not given you any explanation why they were there. Because there is no other explanation other than that they had some connection with the death of Dar Foley. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I submit to you that there is more than reasonable doubt here. I respectfully ask you to find Tom Foley not guilty. Then came prosecutor Terry Norris's turn. She started by attacking the credibility of those witnesses who say they saw the cars. Quote, if you were to believe that all of these vehicles were there was a party at the Foley home that day with a bunch of white cars and a black SUV, and that makes no sense whatsoever. None. Terry Norris wanted the jury thinking only one thing. Who had the motive? It's Tom Foley, whose fingerprint was on the bag of shells in the basement. Tom Foley. Tom Foley is guilty, and I'm asking you to bring back that verdict. Another verdict brings another shattering moment. The outcome of Tom's second trial was far from certain, and then at the fabled 11th hour, it was time. The jury filed in. Quote, Your Honor, we the jury find the defendant not guilty. Tom collapsed to the floor and wept for 20 minutes, said the defense attorney Tom Schaefer when Tom's verdict was read.
Wow, you didn't even really prep me for that one. I was kind of shocked by that too. I don't really see where they kind of overturned it. Just with the other cars and maybe the lack of the cops looking into that. That might have, like, I'm trying to imagine, like, if I was a jury, like, where would I see the holes in this case, no pun intended. And that's the thing, is that if there were cars, and if these witnesses said that, they did no investigation. They just dismissed it as a party at the farm.
Mm-hmm.
Is that really what turned the tables?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Kind of super simplistic.
Mm-hmm. It planted doubt. You cannot have a seed of doubt, right?
Yeah, I guess so. All right, I'm sorry. I interrupted. I was just like, wait, what?
I know.
Okay.
I know. So prosecutor Norris said, quote, he got away with murder, but he almost didn't. We had it. We had him convicted. And to actually have to go back and talk with that family and try to give them some consoling, how do you do that? One of Dar's sisters said regarding the verdict, you're just angry. And you're angry at the jurors and the judge. I mean, there's nothing that you can do about it. Another of her sisters said this, quote, I was more concerned about Heath at that point because I knew that he knew his father killed his mother, and I couldn't even imagine having to go back and live with the man that killed your mother. Tom has regained custody of his son Heath, and he treads very carefully when discussing that tragic day with his son. Tom feels like he deserves to know why his son believes he killed his wife, and Heath's answer to this is, quote, I don't know who else it could have been. Tom said that he will never forget Dar, quote, I still think she's beside me. I'm going to continue to raise our son the way that we wanted him to be raised. When asked by Dateline if Tom harbors any grudges, he replied, quote, all I can say is they made a mistake. All I'm asking is that they search and search and search and search until they find Dee Dee's killer. According to prosecutor Norris, there would be no point to that search. Quote, you're not investigating anymore? Asked Dateline. There's no one to investigate, she said, and there has been no new evidence of anyone else having committed the crime. Huh. Interesting. Now, a couple of interesting things that were discussed in other articles, and one was the fact that there were credit card purchases made with the cards taken from the house, while Tom was incarcerated, and that led back to an IP address in Kalamazoo. They were located at a gas station in Branch County. Now, remember when mentioned before about Dar's brother owning a shotgun and that came up missing? This is one of those theories that has been discussed as well. To be clear, no one has pointed a finger at Brian, as he seems to not have the temperament to hurt his own sister. But Dar's brother, Brian, was an alcoholic and also had been addicted to methamphetamines and had been arrested for this in the past for these activities. However, in subsequent years, had become clean. In the weeks before her murder, Dar told Tom that she wanted to speak with her mother about Brian's behavior in front of her 3 nieces. At that point, Dar did not know about the addiction to meth. She was very close to and protective of his girls. On Tom's advice, Dar stayed quiet, as just his drinking wasn't, a serious threat. Just days prior to her murder, Dar discovered something far more concerning. Brian has reportedly been making meth in his home. According to reporting several years later, Brian had set up multiple labs to make methamphetamines. After discovering this, Dar no longer wanted to speak to her mother. She wanted to go straight to the police. If this was the case, as she was known to have been very outspoken, word of mouth could have reached the individuals dependent upon these drugs Brian had been making. Was it possible that one or even a handful of the individuals took it upon themselves to break into the Foley farm and silence Dar before she had a chance to speak with the police? There are more theories floating around surrounding this tragedy. However, since no one else seems to want to investigate further, the murder at Heath Bar Farm may continue to remain a mystery. A friend of the family, Andrew Lombardo, a former minister from Coldwater, wrote and published a book titled The Ultimate Sacrifice, The Murder of a Small-Town Wife, in which Tom collaborated with. Tom continues to plead with investigators and police to keep searching for his wife's killer. Now, the last thing I want to mention is this. Both Heath, Tom's son, and Skylar, Heath's friend, that was on the farm that day Dar was murdered, told detectives that Tom was wearing the same clothes all day. After the loud sound that they had heard, Tom was wearing the same clothes he had on earlier that day, so he never changed his clothes. Also, to note something important is that Tom did not have any blood on him from the blowback if he was the shooter at such close range. He should have had lots of blood on him and maybe even brain matter, as Dar was shot in the head at close range. Tom was also tested for GSR, which is gunshot residue, and he didn't have any on him. Lastly, he did have a small spot of blood on his pants, but when forensics looked at the pattern, it was determined that this was blood transfer from Tom pulling Dar out of the shower. The other thing I want to point out here is that detectives noticed that the bathtub was dry. If Dar had been taking a shower, why was that tub dry? Now, I think it's possible that Tom did not kill his wife. I mean, everything points to him, but there's the meth theory. And the witness that came forward after Tom was initially convicted of murder, she worked with a sketch artist. And in the Dateline episode, they showed the sketch. The man in the sketch had dark hair, his face was thin with gaunt eyes. So I ask you, do you feel the prosecution had tunnel vision? Are the real killers out there, and do you think they've gotten away with the brutal murder of a wife and mother? I say it's a real possibility.
Oh my God. Listen, I was going back and forth and I was like, okay, well, the motive for the money, that's kind of lame. That's not enough. And I'm listening to you and you're telling me this whole story, but literally right at the end where you say that the kids say that he didn't change his clothes before they heard the loud noise and after he got in the car and took them to their party, he was still wearing the same clothes. Like that in and of itself, if I was on the jury, he's acquitted. Because how is that possible?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, you
and itself exonerates him.
Yeah. You and I both know that would have been a hot mess.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
all over the place.
All over the place. I mean, think about it. It was a shotgun. It blew half of her head off. So yeah.
No. no, you can't commit a murder like that and then go to a party where everybody doesn't see the blood all over you and probably gray matter.
Exactly.
It would be all over you.
Exactly.
And the fact that she's in the shower and she's not taking a shower because the tub is dry. So that sounds to me, I immediately get a vision, like a visionary in my mind's eye that says they told her to get in the shower because they knew it was going to be messy.
Exactly.
They told her that they threatened her and said, get in the shower. And then they shot her. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Because, when I was watching the Dateline and then there was a show on YouTube about it, it never said what she was wearing. It never said she was naked. Didn't say she was in a robe. So, yeah, I like you, Christine. I think they got in there. She heard it. She came running, when they broke the glass. And they directed her to the bathtub because, like you said, big, fat mess.
And the medicine cabinet was torn apart because if they are a bunch of junkies, that is what they're going to look for. Mm-hmm. And junkies don't think to pick up a purse, but they probably will pick up a gaming system because, unfortunately, I do know a junkie or two. Those are the things that they go after, electronics, as if they think they're still very valuable. Or it's just something that they wanted. So they took what they wanted to make it look like a B&E, or just because there was a bunch of them and some of them were poking around and they're like, well, this witch is going to be dead in a few minutes anyway, so she won't miss this. You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't necessarily a B&E. It was probably they went there to go threaten her. And it's wild to me that they're just letting it go. Like, oh, well, the husband got free, so we're defeated. Like, the police? They're just like, we're defeated, so we're not going to do anything. That's insane.
Tunnel vision. Straight tunnel vision. And I also want to point out, so yes, they left the purse. Yes, they took the gaming system. Yes, they rifled through the medicine cabinet. They also ransacked the desk, took the credit card. So how is it that if Tom Foley did this to his wife while he's in prison, how is it that the credit card that was stolen is being used in Kalamazoo? That doesn't make any sense.
Because it was a bunch of crackheads that broke into their house. Mm-hmm. And the crackheads don't freaking think. They have no critical thinking skills.
Yeah, exactly.
Now after you went through that whole story and you just summed it up at the end there, it's like this sounds like a bunch of drug addicts.
Mm-hmm. Now I will also mention that, police mentioned all the things that were taken, but they were like, hey, if it was a B&E, why did they leave the big TV? Why did they leave the DVD? Well, like you said, they take what they want.
Is they too weak to carry it because they're crackheads?
Yeah, because you should have seen this. Like if you click on the link and you watch the videos and the Dateline interview, like the sketch from the sketch artist, I mean, this dude looks emaciated, super, super thin, wild, buggy eyes. And that came from the woman who saw this car rip out of the driveway, the Foley residence. So it all kind of jives that it was drug-related.
Yeah, it kind of really all does kind of tie there.
That's where I'm going. It
all does point to drug-related. And what is kind of a little bit bizarre is the fact that this is actually a relative of hers, and Dar's family was hell-bent against Tom. Mm-hmm. But they also had to know this other portion of the story.
Right.
If it's family.
Right,
so
right.
That makes them now sus. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, what in the hell?
You're sus. You're sus. You're sus.
Yeah. That makes them really suspicious. That they're like, balls to the wall against Tom. All the while, they know that one of their relatives had a very big beef with Dar.
And it wasn't just a relative, it's their brother.
Right.
And guess what else? There was not an interview with the brother. And if you think about it, the dude was into meth. He couldn't kill his sister, but he needed her out of there because, right, when you're a meth head, you're like nutso. You don't care about anything. You just want to keep making those drugs so you can have the drugs, sell the drugs, do the drugs. And his shotgun comes up missing. Just figured, a friend? Because to me, that makes sense that he was in cahoots. I can't do it, but here's the gun. Why don't you guys go and do this?
Yeah, and this is the brother has an issue with drugs, and he's also the one that lost his shotgun, and they never tie anything back to him and investigate him. That, to me, is bananas bonkers.
Mm-hmm. Banana bonkers.
Banana bonkers. That's insane.
Totally insane.
Okay. This whole, I don't know. It was a good story, and I get it, but I'm left with, are you kidding me?
What the what? I know. You know what? We should have been detectives. We could solve a lot of stuff here. Keeping our lens wide open.
Oh my God. That's the thing is the tunnel vision. That's what it is. It's crazy. And it's the easiest path. It's lazy. It's not just tunnel vision. It's lazy.
And if you think about it, this is how a lot of wrongfully convicted people get sent to prison. So if you think about it, Dar was huge in the community, right? So in the beginning of the story, that's what they were talking about. This was an unusual case, not because it was just murder, but because, wow, this is a teacher. This is someone who's involved in the community. We've got to find this. This is going to be a tough one, boys. Well, you didn't turn all the fucking stones.
Yeah, but I think that's where they go wrong. Like in any investigation, if they decide what they think happened, then they go looking to fit the pieces to fit their puzzle, their picture of what happened, instead of the other way around, which is what it should be. Everything and everyone should be considered innocent until proven guilty. But that's where we go wrong. That's where the justice system, it's a human error thing, is everyone is guilty until they're proven innocent. And that is
backwards. Yeah. You know who they needed on this case? They needed the detective from Till and Brian Ognan's case, a guy who, right?
Oh, you have a crush on him.
I don't have a crush on him, but he was good. He was a straight up through and through detective. You know what I mean?
Well, you can argue that he's very slow. I mean, it took him years.
It took him, yeah, but
So, I don't know. Like, it's like with surgeons, right? We say there's only 3 types of surgeons. Fast and good, that's the only one that's really worth that grain of salt. Because then there's good and slow and sucky and fast. So you really got to be fast and good to be a superstar. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to piss on your little crush's parade, but he took a really long time to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, but he had to.
Years.
Yeah, but it took years to get it out of her because she was so deathly afraid. She wasn't saying nothing. So he had to earn her trust. So I'm not letting that go. Nope.
Slow and good. That was slow and good.
Slow and very good.
But too slow.
Slow and very good. And it led to a conviction of the real killers.
I hear you. I know. You have a little thing for him. I get it. I get it, and I understand it, and I respect it. I'm just saying, fast and good is the only way to go.
Yeah, but being fast, you might miss some shit. Like these people here, I feel bad for the guy. Because, initially you're like, oh my God, of course he did it. Of course he did it. But then as you get through everything, you're like, I don't think so.
No, I don't think all throughout your whole story, I don't think there was a time that I said, of course he did it. Because even if he cheated on her, even if he had an affair, which he didn't, but I'm going to the extremes. Even if he cheated on her, even if he had an affair, they were married for 10 years. I mean, shit happens in marriages. And anybody that's ever married, if they tell you that it's picture perfect the whole time, they're goddamn liars, and they should be convicted for something because they're hiding something. Because marriages are rough, and humans are human. We ebb and flow. Our feelings change. Our viewpoints change. Our, life experiences change things around you, including, of course, relationships. So they ebb and flow. And maybe sometimes he was emasculated, but maybe sometimes she made him feel king of the world. You know what I mean? Kings don't work either. And guess what? They're kings. So, I don't know. I don't think that I didn't think at any point in time that I was like, oh yeah, he definitely did it. And the whole glass cane thing, like you made me squirrel over to that for a minute, and I'm like, oh, would that make a noise? And why wouldn't they see the glass? And I was listening, I was drilling in on all those details in my mind's eye. And I was like, well, that doesn't, I don't know. Like, even if they did hear a gunshot, and, I didn't even think of it. I think that's why you floored me when you said he was wearing the same clothes. Because, I'm listening and I'm thinking and I'm envisioning the scenarios. Not at one point did I say to myself, well, did he change his clothes? Or what did he look like when he said, okay, come on, boys, let's go to the party? Like, how do you kill your wife and then fix your face to be around your kid? and go to the party. And then what about all the people at the party? Were they saying that he was a disheveled mess? Or did he just look regular until he started getting worried about his wife? And then he was like, okay, I'm going to leave the boys here with you. I'll be right back. I'm going to see what's keeping up Dar. You know what I mean? Like, is that the demeanor of a murderer? I don't know. Like, I didn't buy into that he was the murderer throughout your whole story. There was questionable, like, well, maybe he could have did it. You never know. Like, people that do devious things, you know, they do be acting in dubious ways, of course, right? So I'm listening and I'm whatever. But you didn't really convince me that he had done it. But you did convince me that he didn't do it just by the simple fact that he never changed his clothes. And the kid said that he had the same clothes on before they went outside to play and at the party. Same clothes, innocent. That's the opposite of a smoking gun.
Exactly.
Literally.
And what person who's going to murder their wife with a shotgun is going to do it with your son and their best friend out in the yard?
Right?
None of it makes sense.
Yeah, no, none of that made sense. The whole time you were telling me about it, I was like, nah, I don't know. I'm just quietly listening to you talk, and I'm like, okay. But when you said that he never changed his clothes, I was like, bam, that's it. And then the brother, and then you tie in the brother had a shotgun, and now it's missing. Oh, bitch, please. They need to be looking at the brother is what they need to be looking at. And Dar's family should be ashamed of themselves that they never put that together. Because I do not believe. I now am convinced. I'm convincing myself. They knew more than they were saying, and they were going after him like a witch hunt. And that actually makes me kind of angry at them, and they are highly sus, and somebody needs to investigate that goddamn brother. Period. End of story.
Yeah, because think of it. Don't look at our brother. Let's look over here. We're going to protect our brother. That's exactly what was going on.
Crazy. It's a little bit crazy town.
It's great, but it is crazy town, but I think it's realistic. Why was this brother not interviewed by Dateline?
Well, obviously, he probably refused.
Exactly. Why? Why would you?
Obviously, because he knows who did it.
I'm going to stay real quiet.
He probably gave him his gun. He gave them his gun.
Exactly. And who's going to find these meth heads? Nobody.
Yeah, nobody. Probably half of them are gone already.
It's probably a really smart thing to do is get some meth heads.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, crazy.
That was a loop-de-loop again.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. So thank you, everyone. That's going to wrap up today's show. As always, we appreciate you coming back. Thank you so much for listening. And we will see you guys back on Wednesday for Round Robin. Have a great week, everyone. Bye.
Bye.